Well, for what I believe is the very first time, we have an all-Manchester FA Cup final, and it should be a really interesting game. But before we get onto that, I do want to talk about the game we've just seen between Man United and Brighton. 0-0, Man United winning 7-6 on penalties, I think, in the end, and it was an interesting game. Brighton with the more dominant team, which is what you expect really. A lot of the time the commentators were going towards the narrative of, oh, United are under a lot of pressure here, and that United shouldn't be in that position. But that shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, I don't think. You've got to take into account the style of football that both teams play. Brighton are obviously possession dominant, a lot about build-up play, and in the first half that was what they focused on. They focused on having the ball in comfortable areas where United were willing to press them, not ridiculously intensely, but to the point where Brighton did have to move it about, and that was where Brighton were managing to get past United. But what didn't help Brighton and their flow was that there were a few injuries in the first half to a fair few players, actually. Solly March picked up what looked like a bad knock at the time. Bruno Fernandes had a period on the floor with a bit of a problem. So there were quite a few problems for both teams, and there were a few stoppages in the first half. So it never really got going in the first half. That there weren't an excess amount of chances. Second half, it was a bit more lively. Brighton started the second half really brightly, and they had a couple of decent opportunities. Danny Welbeck, I think, had the pick of the bunch. He headed a good opportunity over the bar, which he had to keep on target, if we're being honest. But after around 60th minute mark, United, something just seemed to click with them, and they started to, I don't know, play with a bit more passion almost. That there was a bit more belief in them that they could win this game, or I don't know if it was more of a thought from Ten Hag or the players as a collective that if we don't do something here, Brighton are eventually going to break us down, and they're going to get the goal, win the game, go through to the final. So United, they did start to come out a bit more and put the pressure on Brighton a little bit. And towards the end of the game, it was quite a good watch. Brighton, they were finding a bit more space, but the problem they were having was that two very key players, Welbeck and Enciso, who were having good games, had to be replaced. And that meant position change for Pascal Gross, going from playing right back to almost like a number 10 role. So that wasn't ideal. And also Dennis Undav, who had a good season last year. I didn't watch any of him, but this season he's really struggled for minutes in this Brighton team with a few players ahead of him, and it looks a little bit rusty in terms of his first touch. There was an opportunity for him to take a touch and get a clear strike on goal, which he failed to take up with a poor first touch. So yeah, it did affect Brighton, and they in extra time they did look a bit leggy, I'd say. There was a few times where someone like Karim Matoma, who is an excellent dribbler of the ball, would pick the ball up, run past a few players, but once he reached the box, he just didn't have the sharpness in his legs to be able to, fool a defender the way he usually does, and he would sometimes stumble a little bit, things like that. But there was just never any moment where that a moment of magic was to be created in extra time. The only time it came close to happening was when Solly March, just before the very end of the game, managed to turn Cyril Malacia, I think it was, inside out and skip past another player and get to the byline, but nothing came of it. But yeah, there were some brilliant performances throughout the pitch. I thought Bruno Fernandes had a very good game. David De Gea made a few key saves in what was going to be a test of his confidence after Thursday's horror show against Sevilla, let's face it. And to be fair, he passed with flying colours, but he is an experienced goalkeeper now, so I think you have to expect that he can hit back quite well. He will have had to have done it quite a few times in his career. Well, we know he has, basically, but yeah. But for Brighton, I thought Moises Caicedo was superb. He won man of the match, and I wouldn't disagree with that. Alexis McAllister, another brilliant performer, and nearly laid off what would have been a tremendous winner for Kaoru Mitoma, but he just couldn't quite get the touch right. He made the touch a bit too heavy, and that would have been an amazing, intricate piece of play to be finished off by Mitoma had it have gone in. But no, it just wasn't Brighton's day in the end. They were the better team, but I think most people expected that to happen, to be honest, given the way they play and the way they have played all season and the amount of just brilliantly technical players they have in their team. But yeah, it went to penalties, and they were giving a few statistics before the shootout started of why neither team should really win the shootout, and to be honest, they weren't far wrong. Looking at the goalkeeper stats, they were saying neither goalkeeper has a history of making lots of penalty saves. David De Gea has a history of sort of failing at penalty shootouts, whereas Robert Sanchez, this was his first big penalty shootout, really. And what happened, really. All the players scored all their penalties until Solly March took the unlucky 13th penalty and completely skied it. And he had a brilliant game. It's just one of them where it's really unfortunate for him. But he is just a brilliant player, to be honest, Solly March. And the fact that he's been playing in the Premier League for Brighton now for 6 seasons. Well, he'll have been playing for Brighton even longer than that, I would have thought. I don't know when he first broke into their team. But the fact that in the past 5 years before this season, no one at Brighton has managed to, come up with an idea of playing him out on that right wing is just a bit bizarre to me, because he's obviously spent a lot of time playing a variety of positions on the left, playing primarily as a wing-back in more recent years. But since De Zerbi's moved him out onto the right, it's just been like a superb decision, and it's one of them where it's like, why on earth hasn't this been happening all of his career, to be honest? It is a bit bizarre, because you'd think with how much the coaches will be monitoring these players in training day in, day out, someone would notice the technical ability that he has, the dribbling ability, and realise that he has what it takes to play on the right. And yeah, he has had a brilliant season. But yeah, Man United are obviously through, all Manchester derby in the final. And it will be a big game for an even more important reason than usual. I mean, obviously an FA Cup final's big enough in itself, and a Manchester derby's big enough in itself, but there's even more to play for in this one, because Manchester City are now the favourites to win the Premier League. And I don't know when the FA Cup final is, but I'd have thought it would be once the Champions League semi-finals are finished, but before the final. So if Man City do get past Real Madrid in the semi-final, and let's face it, there's a good chance that'd happen. I'd say it's a very evenly tight match, to be honest, on paper. But if Man City are to go to the final and play one of the Milan teams, they'd be the favourites in that. So should Man City win the Premier League and the Champions League semi-final, that's the double that they would be more than likely to win. United are very famous in England for being the only team to win the treble of the Premier League, Champions League and the FA Cup. Manchester United might well be, well, before the Champions League final, the only team that can stop Man City from winning the treble, potentially, because you'd have to fancy Man City against AC Milan or Inter Milan. So yeah, it's set up for a fascinating end to the season and a fascinating FA Cup final. But yeah, anyway, thanks for watching this video and I'll see you next time.